Shortly before midnight on June 5, 1944, southern England spoke in a language too ordinary to attract suspicion. Radio nets pulsed with the administrative murmur of war, call signs acknowledged, fuel states reported, bridging units confirmed ready for embarkation. The phrases were unremarkable, almost tedious. Yet that was precisely their strength. Real armies sound mundane before they become historic. In German headquarters from Paris to Berlin, the same conclusion returned with the weight of inevitability. The Pas-de-Calais was the narrowest crossing of the Channel, scarcely 21 miles at its tightest point. It offered direct routes to major ports and rail lines feeding the Ruhr. Geography favored it. Logistics favored it. Reason itself seemed to favor it. An invasion elsewhere would defy the clean logic of maps. Along England's southeastern coast, that logic was carefully nourished. From the air, reconnaissance photographs revealed orderly vehicle parks, swelling supply dumps, and landing craft clustered with apparent purpose. Canvas and timber became armored silhouettes. Camps were arranged with geometric discipline, as though thousands of men were waiting just beyond the lens. The illusion was not flamboyant, it was methodical. And presiding over this phantom host stood General George S. Patton, publicly sidelined, yet visibly positioned in Kent. His reputation alone suggested offensive intent. To German planners, it felt less like deception and more like confirmation. Then dawn broke over Normandy. Real soldiers waded into real surf. Yet even as the beaches erupted, a larger uncertainty remained suspended over the Channel. Had the invasion begun, or had the true blow not yet fallen? By 1944, Germany's dilemma along the Atlantic coast was brutally simple. The wall stretched from Norway to the Bay of Biscay, thousands of miles of concrete bunkers, artillery casemates, and wire. It could not be defended everywhere with equal strength. Mathematics forbade it. Therefore, strength had to be concentrated. And concentration required prediction. On any staff map, the Pas-de-Calais appeared self-evident. At its narrowest, the Channel measured barely 21 miles. Crossing time was shorter. Air cover from England would be denser. Supply lines into northern France and Belgium were direct, feeding rail networks that led toward the Ruhr. Calais was not merely plausible, it was efficient. Geography hardened into doctrine, and doctrine into conviction. Within the German command structure, conviction acquired institutional weight. Intelligence that affirmed Calais traveled upward with little resistance, reinforcing what senior officers already believed. Reports suggesting alternatives, Normandy, Brittany, encountered hesitation. They required imagination, and imagination is expensive in a hierarchy trained to respect precedent. Over time, expectation filtered perception itself. Allied planners grasped this vulnerability. They did not seek to replace German logic, they sought to inhabit it. If Calais felt inevitable, then every signal, every shadow, every intercepted whisper would gently confirm inevitability. The deception would not shout. It would agree. This was arrogance without theatrics. An army that survives by trusting its model of reality grows slow to discard it. And when the first contradictory signs emerged from Normandy's shores, the greater struggle would not be at the beaches, but inside the certainty Calais had already claimed. Fortitude did not rely on one grand fossud. It was built inside Operation Bodyguard as an ecosystem, many small truths, many small shadows, arranged so that each would confirm the next when examined. Aerial photographs, intercepted signals, administrative routines, and timed delays were designed to agree with one another the way reality does. The deception was not a mask. It was a second world. At the center of that world stood FUSAG, the first U.S. Army group, an army that existed most convincingly on paper. It had order of battle charts that looked properly bureaucratic, training programs that produced the right rhythms, headquarters habits that generated the right clutter, and the logistical friction of a real force preparing to move. In war, paperwork is not decoration. It is the skeleton that holds an army upright. Operation Quicksilver then gave the skeleton a body. Dummy tanks sat in disciplined rows. Vehicle parks appeared, shifted, and reappeared with plausible intent. Embarkation areas seemed to form along the southeastern coast, as if a crossing were being rehearsed in slow motion for the benefit of German reconnaissance aircraft above. Readiness itself was made to breathe. Preparations rose, then paused, explained by weather, shipping schedules, and routine adjustments because real offensives rarely advance in a clean line. They stutter, they wait, they argue with reality. And that was the danger. A single careless fact overheard in a pub, one unit moving at the wrong hour, one inconsistency in the pattern, and the paper army would collapse into theatre. The question was whether the illusion could survive contact with the real invasion about to begin. Fortitude's most precise machinery was not canvas or wood. It was human. Inside MI5, the double-cross system, run through the XX committee, took German agents who had been caught or turned and transformed them into controlled transmitters. The enemy's own reporting lines became a pipeline for Allied design. In a war of mass armies, a single sentence delivered through a trusted channel could redirect divisions. Among these agents, Garbo, Juan Pujol Garcia, was prized less for the quantity of his messages than for their calibration. He did not send propaganda. He sent life. A few truths placed carefully among larger inventions, delays that felt like the limits of human travel, and small imperfections that made the reporting sound handled, not scripted. Credibility was not claimed. It was performed, patiently, over months. The intelligence itself was constructed like a mosaic. Unit names, troop counts, shipping rumors, hints about embarkation areas, vague but suggestive timelines, each piece looked harmless in isolation. Yet when German analysts assembled those fragments, they formed a coherent picture, a major force in southeast England, poised for Calais, still gathering itself for the decisive crossing. Behind the human voices, false radio networks provided an invisible heartbeat. Routine traffic, logistical chatter, administrative noise, the exhausting normality of an army preparing to move, filled the ether with something that felt too dull to be invented. The irony was quiet and heavy. Deception did not work by treating German intelligence as foolish. It worked by respecting it, giving it evidence it could verify, and therefore believe more deeply. And as June approached, the question was no longer whether Germany would receive the story, but whether it would be unable to let it go. June 6, 1944 made Normandy visible in the most concrete way: the dark surf, steel obstacles, mines wired into sand, and machine gun fire stitching the shoreline. Men moved in short bursts between bursts of death, while smoke and salt water blurred the horizon into a single grey line. It looked like the main event because it was the only event anyone could see. But in German headquarters, the decisive battle was not fought with bullets. It was fought with interpretation. Two explanations competed for authority: either Normandy was the Allied main effort, or it was the diversion, an opening blow designed to draw German reserves westward before the true crossing struck at Calais. In war, the first hours are often a test of judgment more than courage. Fortitude had been built for this moment. The paper army did not dissolve when real fighting began. Fusag remained present in southeast England, its radio traffic continuing, its decoy posture unchanged, its readiness signals steady, as if the decisive invasion still waited behind the curtain. The deception did not break under contradiction. It used contradiction as proof. Agent reporting reinforced the sequence. Messages spoke of final preparations, shifting timing windows, and practical adjustments, language that made Normandy sound like a preliminary thrust, not the conclusion. Not false certainty, but plausible process. On the beaches, Allied soldiers fought to turn a fragile foothold into permanence. Behind them, Fortitude purchased time hour by hour, converting German hesitation into operational space. And in that space, the fate of the campaign began to settle, quietly, before Germany even accepted what it was seeing. In the first days after June 6, German strength still leaned toward the Pas-de-Calais like a locked door refusing to open. The 15th Army, positioned to meet what Berlin believed would be the main assault, remained oriented on that narrow water gap. To move it too soon was to gamble that Calais was a mirage. And for a command culture built on reasonable certainty, that gamble felt like negligence. The result could be measured not in what happened, but in what did not. Normandy, at its most fragile, did not face the full weight of a concentrated armored response. Counterattacks came, but often in pieces, delayed, argued over, assembled too slowly to crush the bridgehead while it was still soft. In amphibious war, the first hours decide whether an invasion becomes a foothold or a cemetery. Fortitude aimed to stretch those hours into days. And the deception kept breathing. Dummy activity persisted along England's southeastern coast. Radio nets continued their tired administrative chatter. Readiness signals stayed consistent because real plans do not vanish the moment another front erupts. They linger, they threaten, they hold attention. Inside the German system, tension sharpened. Commanders closer to Normandy pressed for decisive reinforcement. Higher authority feared the moment those reinforcements left, the real invasion would strike Calais, clean, sudden, and irreversible. So orders slowed, hedged, and contradicted. This was the climax Fortitude was built to reach, an army immobilized not by artillery, but by doubt, by the fear that action itself was the trap. And as the beaches in Normandy widened mile by mile, Germany faced a question it could no longer postpone. In the days and weeks after the 6th of June, the belief in Calais did not collapse, it thinned. Reports accumulated. Aerial reconnaissance confirmed expanding Allied positions in Normandy. Prisoner interrogation spoke of fresh divisions arriving across the beaches. Yet institutions rarely abandon a conviction at the first contradiction. They adjust slowly, reluctantly, as if reality itself must submit paperwork before being accepted. By the time German command began to concede that Normandy was the main effort, the character of the battlefield had changed. What had begun as exposed strips of sand hardened into a logistical organism. Artificial harbors at Arromanches and Omaha fed a steady flow of vehicles and fuel. Roads were repaired, airfields carved out, artillery emplaced in depth. The invasion was no longer a question. It was infrastructure. Fortitude's achievement was not permanent illusion. It was decisive delay. In the narrow window when a concentrated armored blow might have driven the Allies back into the sea, hesitation prevailed. Time measured in withheld orders and stationary divisions became the margin between failure and endurance. The operation revealed a sober principle in modern war: perception is terrain. Institutions defend their assumptions as fiercely as coastlines, and sometimes longer than the evidence allows. In quiet rooms in London, agents drafted careful sentences. In signal huts, operators sustained routine traffic. In clerical offices, files moved with deliberate calm. From such ordinary acts emerged strategic consequence. They built an army from paperwork and radio noise, and Germany defended it with real divisions.